By now we know consent can involve a whole lot of talking about sex with your partners, and we've addressed some ways to make some of those conversations a little bit easier. But what about the condom talk? Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. Most of us are used to hearing that we should be using protection when we have sex to help prevent STIs and unplanned pregnancy. And talking about protection methods is an important part of informed consent. The safer sex methods that you decide to use can affect how willing a partner is to participate in a given sexual act. For example, consenting to vaginal sex with a condom is not the same as consenting to vaginal sex without a condom. So this discussion is super important to have with your partners. But it can also be pretty difficult to have for a number of reasons. If you try to have this conversation while you're already in the middle of hooking up, arousal can make it difficult to think or speak clearly. Condoms and other safer sex methods are rarely seen or talked about in porn and movies, so it might not be part of how we imagine sex is supposed to go. That and general awkwardness might make it difficult to come up with the words to use to talk about protection and still keep the mood feeling sexy. And even if you figure out the words, you might worry that your partner will be insulted by you wanting to use protection in the first place. Maybe they'll think you're silly for worrying so much. Or maybe they'll think you don't trust them and are accusing them of being irresponsible in past encounters or unfaithful. There is a lot that could be said about all of these challenges. But today I want to focus on some of those potential objections from a partner and how to reframe the conversation in a hopefully more productive way. Having sex with someone can be a pretty vulnerable thing. You're exposing your body and maybe other parts of your identity to someone. And so when someone says they don't want to touch parts of your body without a barrier in place, it can sometimes be hard not to take that personally. This can be especially true with less common or less well-known methods of protection. For example, thinking of using a condom for vaginal or anal sex might be pretty common, but depending on the community that you're a part of, using condoms or dental dams for oral sex or gloves for manual sex might be less familiar. Even someone who is fine with using a condom for vaginal or anal sex might be surprised or even insulted if asked to use a condom for oral sex. If someone has never used barriers for oral sex before, they might think that the suggestion to do so might mean that their partner thinks their genitals are disgusting or dirty. This is not an easy thing to combat, but I think a good thing to do is try to reframe the situation. Because let's be really clear here, sex is risky. There is no such thing as completely safe sex, only safer sex. Depending on the situation, there might be emotional or social risks, and there are always physical risks, namely STIs and unplanned pregnancy. Let's talk about STIs first. STIs are extremely common, with tens of millions of new infections each year in the US alone. Even asymptomatic cases can cause serious or even life-threatening complications if not treated, and the majority of cases have no noticeable symptoms, which makes it near impossible for someone to know their status without getting tested. And even getting tested has its limitations. Many STIs have incubation periods or other concerns that mean it might take a while before they'll show up on a test. Depending on the specific infection and test, that could be a long time. For example, at best, a negative HIV test only means that you didn't have HIV 3 months ago. What all this means is that even if someone is well-meaning and honestly believes that they are not putting their partner at risk, in the vast majority of cases, there is at least some small possibility that they're wrong about that. And that's just STIs. When it comes to unplanned pregnancy, though there is a wide variety of contraceptive options and many of them are quite effective, any method besides abstinence can fail. And if you watch Jane the Virgin, you know that in our modern world of artificial insemination and ridiculous telenovela-inspired mishaps, even that might fail. Speaking of different protection methods, there are a bunch out there. Today I'm not going into much detail about all of the different options, how to use them, or how to decide among them. But I've left a plethora of such resources in the description. Furthermore, while there are lots of contraceptive options that might be invisible to a partner, such as the birth control pill or IUDs, today I'm talking about methods that are visible to a partner, primarily barrier-type methods such as condoms, internal condoms, dental dams, and gloves. Anyway, all of these barrier methods exist to reduce those physical risks associated with sex that we just discussed, namely STIs and unplanned pregnancy. Sex with a properly used barrier method is much less risky than sex without, but that risk is still not zero. Similarly, there are other factors that can reduce the risks, such as having fewer partners and you and your partners having been tested recently, but those also do not reduce the risk to zero. Informed, consensual sex must always, to some degree, involve a bit of a cost-benefit analysis of possible risks. Each person must decide for themselves how much risk they are okay with taking on. If you tell a partner that you want to use protection and they resist, they are effectively saying one of two things. One, they think you assessed the possible risks incorrectly. Or 2, they think that you should be willing to take on more risk than you just said that you are. In the first case, sure, it's possible that you've assessed the risks incorrectly and it might be worth a discussion. Maybe they've had fewer recent partners than you thought, or have gotten tested more recently. But remember that the risk is still not necessarily zero. And in the second case, it is not okay for someone to decide for you how much risk to take on. Your body, your rules. End of story. Basically, this isn't about trusting your partner. It's about having bodily autonomy. Granted, trust can be a factor, but ultimately, this is about having control over your own body and what you do with it. And your partner needs to respect that. If you can't come to an agreement about protection options for a particular act, maybe suggest sticking to other activities that you can agree on. Or maybe find a new partner. Let me know down in the comments if today's video was helpful or if you'd like to hear anything more about anything I mentioned. If you like this video, press that like button, and if you want to see more from me, don't forget to subscribe. Happy consenting, folks. I'll see you next week. In gloves. Gotta snap seductively. In gloves. In gloves. Oh, goddamn it. Blooper reel. Aw, snap.